are back and we're moving into our second conversation for today. As we said, there are a lot of activities ongoing during this time that focus on gender, on domestic violence. We're talking about human rights issues. And one of the activities in 16 Days of Activism is a media and gender communication workshop. This is being spearheaded by Our Circle. And so here to tell us more, we have Derricia Castillo, who is the managing director of Our Circle. And we also have Lizet, Aldana, who is from RET Americas Belize. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
So let's start off with introductions. Help us understand what RET Americas and Our Circle does.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Belize. Thank you, Marlene, for giving us this opportunity to be on Open Your Eyes this morning. RET Americas is implementing a CARSIP project in Belize, which is called Responsible Engagement for Transition to Improved Response to Gender-Based Violence and Trafficking in Persons. And our main objective is to reduce the incidence of violence against women and young people, particularly gender-based violence and trafficking in persons. And how we are doing this is we are working by strengthening government's response through civil society engagement. And what we do is we're trying to focus on creating resource references. And this would be to help enhance the access to service and also a harmonized protocol for a more informed, victim-sensitive response to gender-based violence and trafficking in persons. And how we're doing this is we're working through capacity development of key frontline responders, public education, and awareness raising initiatives. And through strengthening these civil society, what we are doing is we want to raise, to also monitor service delivery for accountability and transparency by scaling up the monitoring and evaluation and the mechanism for data collection, which is very important because, as we know, data collection is one of our weaknesses, which we have been discussing for a while now. And what we do is RET Americas works very close to human development through the National Women's Commission and the ATIPS Council. And we also partner with civil society organizations, Our Circle, Go Belize, Belize Youth Enhancement for Change, Tikumo Lam Belize, Haven House, and House of Dorcas. These are all organizations that work a lot with response to giving service to victims and survivors of gender-based violence in all aspects, and also for human trafficking. So that is what basically RET Americas Belize is doing at the moment. We also have, as part of our community awareness, a pledge that we share when we go out to do our outreach to the communities, where we ask persons to sign a pledge where they're committing to what we call see something, do something. It's a call for action where we are asking persons to not only sit back and wait until something bad happens, but talk to the person, educate the person about what gender-based violence is, how gender-based violence affects all the aspects of our lives. Also, what are the consequences of gender-based violence? So by signing this pledge, it's not that means that we have to go to the police or we have to call the police, but at the first instance, a push, a slap, hurtful words are part of gender-based violence. And if you call this person and you say, you know what, this is not right, you shouldn't be going through this, you need to address these situations, that is a commitment to reduce the incidence of gender-based violence, because it needs to be stopped at the root, at the beginning of it.
Yes, before it escalates, absolutely.
Exactly. So that's why it is important for us to be able to take this knowledge to persons to know that gender-based violence is not only physical, but it's only emotional, psychological. And importantly, it's financial, because a lot of women say, I need to stay in this relationship because he is taking care of us.
Yeah. Let's move it over to Derricia now to tell us a bit more about our circle so we can hear. Derricia?
Well, hi, yes. Again, just to echo what Liz said, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to share our message and the work that we're doing. So for us at our circle, we are the leading LGBT organization that works towards family inclusion and family equality for LGBT formed units in Belize. So pretty much what that means is we work towards creating social safe spaces. We work towards creating political and legal inclusion of LGBT formed families. Now, when it comes to domestic violence and gender-based violence, of course, for a population that isn't legally recognized in a country such as Belize, you can just imagine how predominant intimate partner violence may be, as a lot of people feel as if though they're not protected under the laws of Belize, or may feel as if though they may be discriminated because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. So we work along with RET Americas and their project to be able to monitor the systems which are working together to try and address gender-based violence and domestic violence, to bring that information to our community, as well as to share insights from our community to these systems in order to make it more inclusive and cater to vulnerable communities such as the LGBT community, such as sex workers, such as persons living with HIV. Yeah. So this partnership with our circle and RET, especially in regards to gender-based violence, is one that we've been looking for a while, and we're grateful to RET for actually including us as a partner in their project. So pretty much that kind of wraps up our relationship with RET Americas, and we've been looking for a while, and we're grateful.
I think we're having some connection issues there, Derricia. Hello?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, we lost just the last bit of what you've said. But I appreciate what you're saying. If I could just go back to one of the issues that you mentioned. You said that there is a challenge in being able to address the situation of gender-based violence in LGBT relationships.
Yes.
So what happens when there is an incident of gender-based violence and you go to report it? What is the situation that you're facing?
Well, Marlene, the sad reality is there is a lot of issues which exist with the system in reporting, whether it's heterosexual violence or violence between what would be considered a straight couple. Mm-hmm. However, couple or linked with the discrimination against the LGBT community which currently exists, it makes it a bit more exhausting. So we would have domestic violence cases or even gender-based violence cases carried to the police department. Like, for instance, if two same-sex couples were going through domestic violence, more than likely they wouldn't get through with the domestic violence unit. The domestic violence unit would refer them to the regular precinct to deal with the issue, as opposed to addressing it as a domestic violence issue. Mm-hmm. And we've had this discussion with the commissioner on several occasions where even our legal advisors and him would have some varying understanding of who the Domestic Violence Act covers. So there is a lot of back and forth in trying to get some form of redress or getting some kind of legal justice when it comes to intimate partner violence for LGBT persons. But what we've started doing is educating our community that they don't necessarily have to go straight to the police department. We have a legal advisor at our circle that can assist them in doing their claims and taking it straight to the family court. Okay. Now, we encourage them to use the channels with the police department, because our circle is also one of the partners with the Women's the Women's Department, the Women's Commission, with the Women's Commission for receiving intake in regards to any issues with the pathway to addressing gender-based violence.
Yeah.
So we encourage them to use the system which exists. However, majority of the reports that we're getting is the fact that a lot of them are not being counted or being dealt with in the domestic violence unit, and would rather have to go and report an assault. Or report an assault or report wounding or battery, which limits the protection that same-sex couples can get, because then that leads to not being able to get that order of protection, to get that person immediately removed out of the household. Yeah. We've had a case where the ruling was two partners, and the police came to take out one, and because they did not recognize that relationship, the other partner said, well, I pay bills here. So the person, the alleged victim, had to give that person 30 days notice for that person to move. Now imagine that you're in the house still with your child, and the perpetrator is still within that household tormenting you every day. And as Liz mentioned, it doesn't have to be physical. Yeah. Sometimes just their presence in that household is a psychological toll on you, on your children, and that's a sad reality that the LGBT community has to face in Belize every day.
Wow. Well, I know how much advocacy work takes place behind the scenes in being able to enhance the legislation that does exist, and to ensure that it's more inclusive. And what I'm hearing from you, it clearly shows how we are neglecting a part of our population here. So we hope that you are able to make some progress there. But let's bring it to the activities that you've scheduled for this week. So you have a communication workshop coming up, and I wanted to hear more. We were interested to hear more about what your goals are here, and what are some of the things that you're hoping you can be able to teach members of the workshop.
Well, we are actually hoping that it would be, we would get participation from the media agencies, the freelance reporters, as well as civil society organizations. Because what we want to foster is an open and honest communication as to the role the media has to play in the advocacy work that we do, in the bringing across of gender-sensitive information to not only our community members, but to the wider Belizean society. And we also want the CSOs to be able to receive information from the media as to how do we give them the information that they're looking for to ensure that our advocacy efforts are actually meaningful and something that the media would want to pick up. Yeah. Because what is a priority to me and my organization may not make breaking news, because it's not portrayed in a way that shows its urgency or the victimization or discrimination that is occurring. So we want to foster an open discussion between media and civil society, and our objective is pretty much to bring across what we've entitled as a Gender 101. This kind of stemmed out from a Transgender Day of Remembrance event that we planned, looking at the transgender community and the fact that they are more than just a number. Because we've seen that a lot of the cases in regards to the transgender community, their death and their violence has been reported as just another death or just another violence, as opposed to it being documented as what it actually is. Belize doesn't have a hate crime legislation. Media can assist in the way they bring across their message. CSOs can assist in the way they take the messages to the media. So we think it's time for us to have that open and honest communication about how do we integrate gender issues into not only the work that we do, but also in the media's investigative journalism. How do we get the story? How do we get the understanding? How do we portray it the way that it is real and the way that it can be used when we go towards reviews such as the UPR, such as the ICCPR, I'm sorry, the Universal
I don't know what you're saying. Yeah. I remember.
The United Nations reviews and stuff like that. There are scorecards for our countries, and we can only use the information that is given to us. So if the media doesn't represent it well, then we can't cite those cases. Yeah. We can't reference those cases because as CSOs, we may know that it's an LGBT issue, but if it's not brought across as an issue or a gender equality issue, then it's limited to no benefit to the work that we do in regards to advocacy. And I think we're at a point now where the conversation is more. Sure.
Yeah. No, I wanted, well, two things came to mind. One is understanding the language. And I think we had a classic example just now. Every sector, every industry have their own lingo. They have their own jargon that they use. And one of the things I find is that as the world, as we work on certain issues, the language is meant to be very inclusive when you're talking about LGBTI, and sometimes you have additional representation added into that. But it's not always widespread knowledge. So where it's important to you for inclusion, it may not be important, well, not important, it may not be the best way to communicate the issue to a broader audience who's less exposed. I think in settings like this, it's always, it's a critical part of being able to understand, one, why you move towards more inclusive language, and how do you find a middle ground where it is still something that when you're disseminating information to everyone, that they know what you're talking about. Because then you're only speaking to the people who you're working with instead of a broader audience.
That is definitely true. We also have a section that we've entitled Creating Stories, where it speaks exactly to that. Like, while I would be knowing your target audience and knowing how the information is going out. So we definitely have a part where we will be discussing that. Because if I were to make a blog for the Our Circle website, it would definitely be completely a different tone, a different way of writing, as opposed to putting out a document out there that is factual, that can be referenced, that can be utilized. So we definitely have a section where we're talking about creating stories. And we actually framed that from a Brown Bag discussion that we had, I think it was a year ago with Mr. William Neal. So we've incorporated a lot of the work that we've been doing, and we're trying to create that synergy between the media and the CSOs by bringing them together for this honest and open conversation. What do you want from me? How can I make it better? How can I work with you better? How can we work together to get the issues out there?
Yeah. And I think it's critical. You know, I actually really, I think this issue was reinforced just last week when there was the Orange Day, the International Day for Elimination of Violence Against Women and Girls. So we talk very openly about gender-based violence. And I, you know, the question that I got immediately after is, what exactly is gender-based violence? And so we expanded the language to say gender-based violence when still in households it's just domestic abuse or domestic violence. And so, you know, I think it's such a hard, you want to progress and be inclusive, but you also don't want to forget that people have to catch up with us along the way. How do you, Lizet, let's take that one into consideration.
Yes, and that is one of the things that RET America is working on. In many cases, and as you rightly said, we talk about domestic violence. And for a long time, we have just ignored the male part of it. And we say domestic violence. And a lot of persons, when they talk about domestic violence, they think about only the female at home is being abused. However, when we talk about gender-based violence, we are talking about general, men, women, young boys, young girls, and even within the same family, because it doesn't necessarily have to be a partner, a sexual partner or a common law or anything like that. It could be from within the same household, a brother, a sister, a grandparent that is being abused. So when we talk about gender, we're talking an all-inclusive for everyone. Yeah. In many cases, we see that men are left out of the picture. We don't talk about men being abused. We talk about females being abused. However, there is a lot of male abuse. So when we start talking about gender-based violence, we are talking about everyone, leaving no one behind. Yeah. And as
I just let me, because I wanted to kind of get a response to it. I think I completely understand. You know, it's as I said, it's being inclusive, and we recognize that there's so many different forms of violence that can take place in the home. But don't you worry sometimes that because it has become so inclusive, that some people don't necessarily connect with the message? I hear gender-based violence, but I'm a domestic violence victim, and maybe it doesn't build the same level of connection because you and the organizations want to be inclusive, but the public understanding may be at a different place.
Okay, yes, that is very true. And that's why it is very important for us to do the community awareness. Yeah. What we do when we go out to the communities is we take this information. We have been doing training or sensitization with BDF, frontline workers, healthcare providers, and most importantly, community advocates that can help these persons in these situations. And we bring it from a topic of where we make a difference between sex and gender. A lot of persons think about only the sex part of it, but sex and gender are two different things. A gender is a point where is what we feel, how we feel. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be male or female. Yeah. It could be for anyone. So community awareness is very important for us to be able to, for the population to be able to communicate better, to understand what the issues are regarding gender-based violence. Yes. And as Derricia rightly said, for the community to be able to do proper reporting to the media and get out their stories, they need to also know what these things mean.
Yeah. It's definitely, I think, a part of the bridge in helping with that community education. And it starts with having the participants learn and understand and internalize the information as well. The other issue, and maybe Derricia, I was thinking about it when you were talking about the situation of reporting domestic violence. You know, a lot of the information that may be disseminated comes sometimes from government departments. It may come from the police department. How do we work to make sure they are on board as well, if they are a part of how the message is communicated or how the information is communicated?
Well, we definitely have an open relationship with the Commissioner of Police. I know when he was newly appointed commissioner, we had a meeting with him. We brought our issues, which still include domestic violence and gender-based violence. He has offered in the past, and we're still hoping that we can find a way to finance and ensure that we can include a larger portion in regards to human rights, to gender-based violence, to understanding the human nature behind policing, if I can use that loosely. And one of the things that we actually did with our Vote with Pride campaign, which was right before election, was we got the commitment of the now Prime Minister that he will definitely ensure that the police department works on documenting these cases in regards to capturing persons' sexual orientation and gender identity, because he has agreed that there is a need for a hate crime legislation in Belize. And he's also agreed the same thing you mentioned, that the information that would drive that needs to be state information. So by having the police department document these cases and having a form which would be more inclusive to persons being able to identify, that would definitely be a step forward. No, that won't be the fix all, because some of the vulnerable populations may not feel comfortable disclosing their identity or their characteristics which would make them vulnerable. So that would also mean us working with our community, as Liz rightfully said, to inform them and educate them about the changes that would be made, as well as working with the frontline workers like we're doing now to ensure that everyone is treated equally. I mean, especially in regards to the police department, their mandate is to protect and serve. It doesn't say protect and serve who you feel you want to protect and
Or
who you feel you need to serve. Yeah, or who you exactly, or who you recognize. So it's to protect and serve, and that means protecting and serving everyone. So it definitely is going to have to be a three-pronged approach to getting this information in, to getting vulnerable communities to be documented by the police department, to get the vulnerable communities to feel comfortable working with the police department and trusting the police department with their information, as well as ensuring that, you know, the police, the frontline police officers are well educated, have enough insight into human rights to be able to look at persons walking into that police station as a victim that I need to assist, as opposed to sexual orientation, as opposed to HIV status, as opposed to wealth or economic status. So it definitely is going to be a process. It's a process that we've flagged not only locally but at the UN, and we're hoping to see some change to create the environment for us to be able to move towards getting some kind of state documentation to support the work that we're doing.
And I am glad you said that, because that really takes me to the next point, which is important in building the connection. So you work with the vulnerable groups that you explained earlier. You want to have this workshop with the media about how they communicate some of the issues faced by this vulnerable population. You also have gotten commitment to work along with, to get the police department up to par as well, or at least more aware of the emerging issues that take place with vulnerable populations. But for me, the fundamental question is why? Why is it important? What happens when we don't have an official report of, let's say, a murder that was triggered by somebody's transgender status, or whether a murder isn't, or some form of abuse isn't recorded as a spousal abuse or partner abuse between a homosexual couple? What difference does it make in the work that you do and the reporting that is needed?
It brings more visibility. And bringing visibility means that the state systems cater to these, and I'll use invisible very loosely, to these invisible populations, because what works for a woman who is born a woman and has attraction to the opposite sex may not necessarily be the same intervention that can work for a trans woman who is attracted to a man. So we look at it, and I'm not only looking at LGBT, but looking at persons living with HIV. I mean, Marlene, if we look at the work that has been done in the world of HIV, with today being World AIDS Day, I think it's very important to use that as an example. The only way that work could have been done was by making persons living with HIV visible, making the data available, making the system understand that there is a community of citizens who have needs that are not being met. And I mean, it's not that you're asking for anything specific. You're just asking to be visible so that the interventions that are created can cater to the persons who are citizens within this country. I mean, I had this discussion yesterday with someone about how great the systems are that Belize has put in place in addressing poverty, in working with youth, with working towards gender equality. However, there's a difference within having an inclusive system, like you rightfully mentioned, and having a system that excludes a certain population. And it may not be necessarily that they're excluding them purposefully, but sometimes not making the provisions or the second thought about what happens with this community is where we're truly left behind, because we see a lot of the work being done, especially, and one of our circle's mandate is looking at the family laws and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We still have a group of persons within Belize who are taxpayers, within Belize who are contributing to the growth and development of our country, where their families aren't counted, where their families aren't protected. And I say aren't protected because if we go back again to the Domestic Violence Act, it's up for interpretation if same-sex couples can be protected through the Domestic Violence Act, which gives them the other protections that can go farther to assist not only their physical well-being, but their psychological, emotional, and financial well-being.
Yeah. And you know, I hear what you're saying, and I think the fundamental issue is that you shouldn't have to justify contributions to society to be counted or considered under the law. And you know, we do have a way to go when it comes to that. So
yes,
we really wish you the best for the workshop that's coming up. I think building bridges is always important. Getting everyone at the same place and understanding the issues and how we talk about the issues, or sometimes how we approach them, because we may be too uncomfortable or too shy or unaware. So I do hope that it begins a process of a continuous education for both the civil society that are involved and the media as well. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you very much, Marlene.
We always appreciate you having the time to let us know what you're doing and to help us understand, and our viewers, a bit more as well. Do stay safe and take care.
You too. Thank you.
All right. With that, we're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we are going to be talking about apples that are for sale. Of course, this is a fundraiser for Belize Camping Experience. We'll tell you all about it after the break, so stay tuned.